and what are some of the areas we think other people could focus on to get the maximum benefit. Just a quick process note, we will be in this room throughout the day. So we're not doing a code labs like some of the other APIs, because it's a fairly simple API, and we hope that once you go through this session, you'll have a good understanding of what needs to be done. But we can interact with, our entire team is here, they'll all be here. And so after this session, if you're available after lunch, we will be in this room. Come and talk to us. We'd love to hear what you're doing with Indic technologies, how we can help, and just get a better understanding of what the opportunity is. So with that, this doesn't work. All right. So just a quick level set in terms of the numbers and the macroeconomic climate in which we operate. Some of these things are very familiar to most of you. India has got a large economy. Even though in per capita terms it's still small, it's growing very, very fast. And when you look at projected growth rates of above 6% over the course of decades, that changes everything. It transforms everything. Society becomes more literate. Society has more disposable income. It changes class structures. It changes educational levels. And we're just beginning to see this transformation in India. So we firmly believe that this growth in India has happened since 91. So it's been about 15 years. We are sort of at the beginning stages of a much longer expansion in the macroeconomic climate. And that has significant ramifications, as we'll see, for Indic computing in specific. So one of the things that's already happening is literacy rates are growing very quickly. The census indicates that about 650 million literate people in India. Even if you don't, even if the census numbers are sort of, they vary across state and they may not be, exactly the right demographic, you can actually apply a much higher bar and you can say, well, what is the newspaper readership in India? And even that number is 200 million and growing fast. India is one of the few countries in the world where print newspaper readership is growing. In most countries it's falling, in India it's growing. So people are getting literate, they're reading, they're fluent, and that population is very large. If you break down that population by language, you'll find that about 10% are English speaking, the rest are vernacular local language readers. So this is true in the overall literacy number. This is also true in the newspaper readership number. So after 200 million newspaper readers in India, 20 million are English, 180 million are vernacular newspaper readers. And the growth is mostly happening in vernacular sector. So whichever way you slice it, the opportunity is very, very large. Right? So given these numbers, it's very surprising to see some of the online statistics of Indian connectivity. So while mobile phones are growing, even though most of the usage is voice and very little data, internet connections are very, very low. 40 to 50 million people are online with an internet connection. It's not even growing that fast. In contrast, China has now, I think, crossed 250 million internet users and at a faster growth rate than India. And if you tie these numbers with the language numbers and literacy numbers, it's very clear that one of the prime reasons for this is that we're reaching a language barrier. So if you look at the 80 million people who speak English in the census, or the 20 million people who read English newspapers, then this 40 million number begins to make more sense. Because up to very recently, it was very difficult to do anything online if you didn't speak English. Right? And that is slowly starting to change. But that is, we think, a primary barrier for wider adoption of internet and online services, which is why we are making investments and we are focusing on Indic language technology. And I'm excited to see at least some of you are interested in doing the same thing, and hopefully you can get into more details of how we can work together to make this happen. So there are three primary barriers to adoption as we see it. There are three primary classes of barriers. The first is access. The second is content, and the third is applications. And we'll talk about each of these. We're looking at each of these three areas, and we're doing things specifically to address some of these concerns. So in terms of access, first of all, there's a basic physical access. If I want to use the internet to search for information, is there something near, conveniently located? Can I go to a kiosk? Can I have an affordable broadband connection and a PC that I can use in my home? What is the mechanism by which I can physically access? That is something that's being worked on. It's still not there yet, but it's being worked on actively by SIFI, for example, is expanding in many areas, tier 2, tier 3 cities. The government is doing a big push into rural areas where they're setting up kiosks across the country so that government service can be delivered over the internet as well. So some of the things that we've done are kind of closer to what our core competency is, which is the lack of the ability to type, to enter information in Indic languages. So we've all seen this, right? You have an English keyboard and you want to type text in Hindi. How do you do it? Right? So for some of us, the solution has been around for a while. You can download an IME. You can actually do a keyboard map, and you can actually just train yourself, or you get a sticker, or you can train yourself to say, when I hit A, it's when I hit capital A, it's A, and you can train yourself with these rules, but that's not very useful for mass adoption. So we built the transliteration technology platform that Prasad talked about this morning, which allows you to type phonetically. It does require that you know some English, but as long as you know that, as long as you can type out the word the way it sounds as opposed to knowing the correct spelling, we will take the English word and phonetically transliterate into the local script. We support right now 5 Indian languages: Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, and Kannada. And of course, we'll work on expanding this in the future. So we launched this on Labs as a technology. We got some great feedback, and based on that feedback, we started incorporating it into different products. So an example you see in the screenshot is Blogger. So transliteration is now embedded into Blogger, so you can actually write a blog post in one of these 5 languages. You can see in the drop-down list there, and you start typing phonetically, and we'll transliterate the word into the language you've selected, in this case Hindi. And once we launch this, we've seen that active blogging communities are being developed using this technology, because people have the need to express themselves, right? They want to express themselves in a language that they feel comfortable with, or for certain types of things that are better expressed in your local language. Cultural things, literary things, religious things. You may want to express those things in your local language, and this is a great tool to be able to do that. So it's interesting that when we launched our API, which is why we're primarily here today, the first application that someone built using our API was a plugin into WordPress. So they're basically saying, there are lots of bloggers out there who don't use Blogger, they use WordPress, but they would really like to be able to type in these languages. So that plugin was launched. Last time I checked, it was getting a fair number of users downloading it and using it. So this is the access issue, and we're making some strides. A lot more needs to be done. It needs to be a completely seamless process to be able to enter text in whatever language you choose. Okay. Technical difficulty here. Just give me 1 second. I think we might have frozen up. Yeah, there we go. Got it. You got it. Thanks. Great. Thanks, Anupama. So the second issue is, so we talked about access. Second issue is content. And content, the essential issue is that the ecosystem is not developed yet, right? So we're seeing it develop slowly, but we're still sort of in the process of content providers saying, we don't see enough volume of people searching for our information or coming and visiting our site, so we're not going to make investments in creating the content. And similarly, people who search for information say, well, we're not seeing enough content, so I'm really not going to search in Tamil because I'm not seeing that much information. There's more information available in English. If you look at the way the English web developed, content providers came first, people who search for information came second. So the Indic web is no different. It will develop in the same way, and we're beginning to see already people saying, We understand that the growth in India will come from Indic languages. Just macroeconomic demographic numbers illustrate that if nothing else does. And so we'll start making the investments. And for example, we've launched Google News in Hindi, and we've seen a lot of news sites being added to Google News in Hindi as more Hindi news sites come online. So content providers are now beginning to realize this is an area that they need to actively invest in, and as that grows, the content available in Hindi gets better, and more people come and search for that content and get more value, and that will be a virtuous cycle that will keep going. We're still in the early stages of this virtuous cycle, but we are hopeful that this will accelerate in the years to come. And we are doing things to try and make this happen faster. The screenshot you see here is an interesting application that we launched maybe 6 months ago to do automated machine translation to and from Hindi and English. So you can take a piece of English text and you can translate into Hindi and vice versa. And this is done using a statistical machine translation system. There's no translator sitting in the back end. This is automated. So there are a couple of ways you can use this. The first way you can use it is you just take in a piece of arbitrary text and translate it. Another way you can use it is you can just give it a URL of an English web page and translate it into Hindi. So you can imagine Wikipedia in Hindi, for example, has 18,000 entries. Most of them just stubs, placeholders. Wikipedia in English has many, many millions of entries. So at a minimum, you can go to Wikipedia in English and say, translate this to Hindi. And suddenly the entire English Wikipedia is available to you. Now the quality is clearly not as good as a person doing the translation manually is going to be, but it's enough to get the information that you need, and the quality will improve over time. This example is another way we can use this in search. So we have this thing called cross-language search using this translation technology where you can enter a query in Hindi, we can translate the query into English, issue the query in English, get results in English, and then translate the results back into Hindi. So what you see is a Hindi query translated into English, the results of the original English query on the right side, and then the translated results on the left side. And hopefully as the Hindi ecosystem develops, this will be a stopgap measure to at least feed content in from the English web so that people can get what they're looking for. So, you know, things like this we're hoping will kind of accelerate this ecosystem, the development of the ecosystem. And the third thing is applications. So a couple of things that we see as issues. One is, you know, localization is not enough. You can't simply take, you know, an existing application and say, I will create a localized interface in Hindi or Tamil or Telugu and, you know, I'm done. That's not enough. The interfaces, the user experiences need to be completely seamless. So for example, in Orkut, we have launched Orkut Scraps using transliteration in 5 languages. So if you have, for example, a Telugu interface for Orkut, you can actually now go look at everything in Telugu, but also scrap your friends in Telugu. So it's a much more seamless experience than saying, I see the sort of interface in Telugu, but I still have to do everything in English as I interact with the application, interact with my friends. So that's one example of, you can start typing SAR, we will transliterate that and find the Hindi prefix and then use that to generate suggestions. So you will see a list of suggestions, as you can see in this drop-down list, to say, you know, Sarkar, Sarkari Naukri, Sarkar Raj, and you can just select what you're looking for and we'll issue the query. So if you're not quite sure how to formulate a query, we can help you do that through suggestions. This is one example of saying, let's go beyond localization to understand how we can create compelling applications to serve the needs of our user base. So we talked about this, you know, we need to overcome these barriers of access, content, applications. One way in which we can help do this, open to the broader developer community, is through the APIs. We have 2 APIs that Anupama is going to talk about today. The Transliteration Api, to enable this transliteration technology to be, transliteration is a phonetic mapping. So there's no translation of the meaning of the word. So Hamesha is transliterated in English, H-A-M-E-S-H-A, Hamesha is transliterated to the word that sounds the same in Hindi, right? Translation is basically, I take a word in English and I give you the equivalent word in Hindi that has the same meaning. So they're 2 different things and we have different APIs to address those. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anupama, who will take you through the details of this. and then we'll be here after this talk as well. Anupama? I think you may want this.
So, hi everybody, I am Anupama, and the best way to start off with the API discussion is probably with a demo which shows what the API can do, and then we'll go into the details of the API. So, this is a sample page which any of you could have hosted, and basically it has some content here in English mainly, and there is a small text box here where basically the web page developer has asked everyone to leave their best wishes for Big B. So now ideally you would want, ideally people can enter English text in this particular text box, but with the Transliteration API, the kind of functionality that you will get is basically a kind of indication saying that you can type in an Indic language, and here you also have a choice of other Indic languages as Rahul mentioned, and now basically you have got the ability to allow your users to leave comments in other languages other than English. So this is the functionality given by the Transliteration API, and a few additional things which you can do is basically you can toggle this button which allows you to understand whether you are typing in the Indic language or in the English language. So many people will probably want to type in English words in the middle of their comment, so they might want to type say up and then so big. Now it won't translate mainly because it's off. Also you get the additional feature of allowing menu, a suggestion menu which will allow you to correct the words. So if the transliteration is wrong, your user can actually correct the word to something which sounds correct in English, in Hindi. So, the other API which we are also discussing today is the Translation API. So for this, supposing your user base also consisted of Hindi users who are not so comfortable reading the English language content on your page, then they could potentially use the Translation API to basically read the whole thing in Hindi. So here I have a read in Hindi which is not so visible here, but there's a read in Hindi link, and basically we are using the Translation API in the back end to convert the whole thing into Hindi content, which conveys meaning to the Hindi users. So now we'll go into the details of the API which is actually being used here in this demo. So what are we trying to add here? Basically we are allowing, we want to add the functionality for users to add comments in an Indic language. So different kinds of things that they should be able to do: choose an Indic language, one of the 5 which we support, type Indic words, choose alternate transliterations, also mix English and Indic words in comments. So since most users are bilingual in nature, they will probably feel comfortable doing this. So here are the 4 easy steps to enable transliteration. We'll go into details of each step in subsequent slides. So this is just a summary, and the first step is loading the JavaScript and the CSS. So you will of course have to load the Transliteration API JavaScript and the relevant CSS. The second step is to create a transliteration control. So transliteration control is your main point of interaction for all the transliteration activities. You will create this object and then use it to make all kinds of calls related to transliteration throughout your web page. You will have to specify certain options for this transliteration control. The first one being source and destination language. So currently the only source language that we allow is English, and the destination language can be one of the 5 languages. The second thing you can specify is the default state of transliteration. So by default state of transliteration, what we mean is whether we should start off with transliteration enabled in the Indic language or whether English is the default. So depending on the user base you expect for your web page, you can modify this. So if your page is predominantly Hindi and you expect Hindi users to come and leave Hindi comments, then you probably want it in the on state to start off with. Then there is a shortcut key. So to allow them to toggle between English and the chosen Indic language, you might want to give a shortcut key. So So the one we commonly use in most Google products for transliteration is Control G. Okay. The third step is to actually enable transliteration. So you might have existing text fields. So in your web page, this particular API only supports text boxes and text areas. It's multi-line text boxes or single line text boxes only. And you can pass in the IDs for these to a particular call and just say make transliteratable, and it will start working here. And this is the point where actually the transliteration code is hooking on to all the events which occur on the on that text area. So we will need to track events like clicks and key presses in order to translate it at the right moment. The fourth point is an optional thing. So you saw a small button which said and which was which you could use to toggle on and off, and the drop down menu. So this is called the visible control, which is useful for the user. So the default control can be shown to the user, or you could also customize it, as we will see in future slides. So going into the details of the first step. So for loading the JavaScript, the first thing you should do is you should load the bootstrapper code from the JS API of Google. So google.com/uds/JS API will bring in some code which will allow you to subsequently load the transliteration API code. The second thing you will do is you will say google.load elements package transliteration. So transliteration package is a part of the elements module. So you are asking for the version 1 of this particular API. And the third thing is the CSS. So you need the CSS because it will control the positioning of the suggestion menu. You saw a menu which used to suggest alternative transliterations. So this thing is sort of customized based on the CSS. Also the button and the drop down menu which you see for choosing the language, all of this is controlled by the CSS specifications in this particular style sheet. Okay. Now you create the transliteration control. So for transliteration control, you have to first define the options. So the first one is source language. We have an enumerated type called language code, which will allow you to say English, Hindi, Kannada and so on in a more definite manner. So you can use source language and give the enumerated code for English and destination language similarly. The shortcut key can be, it's a string basically, and it is made up of a string of modifiers and some alphabet. And you can choose anything of Control, Alt, Shift and so on, whichever is convenient for you. The last thing is transliteration enabled. This is the default state of transliteration, and here we are setting it to true. After defining these options, we actually instantiate a transliteration control. So the actual thing is new google.elements.transliteration control, and you pass in the options. The third step is to specify the text IDs. So supposing you had text fields whose IDs were transl1, transl2, you would put them in an array and then pass them to the function called make transliteratable. So here you can note that apart from just the IDs, you can also pass the element references. So if you have forms, iframes and stuff like that, if by chance you don't have an ID, but if you can still access the text field, you can directly pass the element reference itself in the array. The final step, which is the optional step, is to draw the visible control. So for this you just create an empty div, and in this case I have chosen the div's ID to be transl control, which you can see in the first line of the show control method. So you specify the ID of the div in which you want the control to be displayed, and then you specify the type of the control. So supposing your users are for a single language, then you probably don't want the drop down menu. So then you specify the control type to be single language button, otherwise you will say multi-language button. So this is the complete example basically. You have the options, you have instantiated it, then you have the text box and its IDs are getting passed in the make transliteratable call, and finally the optional step of show control, which is generating that small button and the drop down. Okay, now we move on to a few more features which are available with this API. So for aesthetics and user friendliness, you might want to use any of the below things. So one thing is, if your page is using some template or some coloring, and you probably don't want the default gray colored button, so you need to modify the CSS. So that's fairly simple to do with our thing. You just download the api.css, change certain coloring factors, and this is explained in the comments in the starting part actually. One thing you have to be careful about here is images are actually being loaded relatively within the CSS. So you will have to modify that to the absolute path within the CSS and everything will work fine. Sometimes you may not even want to use the default control. You may want a different kind of control like a checkbox or say a select button kind of thing for choosing the language. So depending on that, you can just not show our default control and code up all of this. If you are writing the code for all of these, you will probably want to use one other feature which we have, which is the add event listener. So add event listener is a call which allows you to add handlers for specific events, and these events are of specific mainly 3-4 types, and the main ones are the language change event or the transliteration state change event if it is turned on or off. So here there is a short example here which you can see. So here in this example, add event listener is being called for language changed event, and we want to call the transliterate language change handler at this point. So this gives a signal to the Transliteration API code that if the language changes, please call transliterate language change handler. In the function, there is an event object E which is being passed, and this event object will have different parameters based on the event type itself. So in this case, because it's a language changed event, you get the source language and the destination language in the event object, and you can basically alert the user. You can say you have chosen Tamil as your language. So there's a short demo to illustrate a few of these things. So actually this one is where we have actually blended the CSS. So the ideal thing would have been this, the default package would have come with a grey colored button, and if you use a pink colored page, then you can actually modify the CSS. Also, if you were to change the language, I have put in an alert saying you have chosen Tamil as your language. I display it in a div. So you could do many more things like this. The Firefox plugin which was released recently, also from Google itself, was actually built on the API, and this shows another advantage of the add event listener method. So supposing I were to go to google.com, this particular block is the extension which I have installed. If I turn on this extension, basically by toggling it, I can basically type I guess the network is probably giving problems again, but basically this particular extension is able to track for each site whether you want the transliteration to be on or off, and in this case you would have used the add event listener call to do this change. So if the state changed to on or off, it will basically store in the memory for the extension saying that this site google.com likes to have transliteration on for Kannada and so on. Now a few more features of the API. You can basically help the user use the feature in many ways. For many of the users, Indic language experience on the web is quite new, so they will encounter several obstacles, so you should probably help them out in these cases. So one is detecting supported configurations. So you have a is browser compatible call which you can use to detect whether the JavaScript is going to work on that user's machine or not. The second thing is the detection of font support on the user system. So actually in Firefox 2, if in certain configurations, even on Windows XP, you may have the user may not see the rendering correctly. The combined characters like kya, ka, half ka and half ya will come out in an unreadable way. So for this, actually there is a fix where the user can go and enable complex script rendering, and there are many steps that they can follow. So you can use this google.language.isFontRendering supported for a particular language and essentially alert the user regarding the corrective action. Otherwise they may find it unreadable and just go away. So this is a better proactive action that you can take. Alerting the user if network connection is not available. So since we are basically transliterating on the server, if there is a network problem, then transliterations may not happen. So you can hook onto events for this as well. Okay. So if you don't want the UI elements but just want the transliteration technology, we have a low level transliteration API available as well. So this basically gives you a very basic functionality. You give the word and you get a set of transliterations. You get basically up to 5 transliterations, and they are ranked according to how the system thinks they are correct. You basically pass English words in an array in this particular format. You just pass the word and specify the source and the target language, and you specify a callback function. So this function is going to get a parameter called result, and you can process this whenever the call returns. And as highlighted in this example, result.transliterations is the one which is going to have all the transliterations, and since it's an array you are passing, you can get more than transliterations for more than one word, and you can pass through this array and get the resulting answers. Now we talked about Transliteration API. There is also a Translation API which is currently supported for many other international languages, but more importantly in our context for English to Hindi and Hindi to English as well. This will allow users to translate content present on your web page and increase your user base. So this is using exactly the same technology that works behind translate.google.com, and there are 2 parts to this API. The first one is actually quite a generic one. It is called google.language.detect. So if you have a block of text, you can just pass it to this function and ask it to tell you what the language of this text is. So the usage is given in this code snippet where you can basically pass the text, and again you will have a callback function that will actually process the results. Then the second thing is the actual translate call. You can pass in plain text or even complete HTML. So in the example which I showed you, there was actually HTML text there with font and hyperlinks and stuff like that, but it basically passed through that and translated the right things and gave back the result again formatted. So you can basically process complete web page content through this API. And result.translation will have the translated text. So this is an example where we are given some English text, and basically the result is in Hindi. So okay, so here ideally you can actually, you also have one more way of specifying the translate call. I'm sorry, there's a mistake on the slide. You can leave the first parameter actually empty, and it will detect the language of the thing and translate it to the source thing. So here it should have been google.language.translate text, and even if you don't specify the source and specify the target as Hindi, it will translate it into Hindi. Okay. So these are the links that you can use for going into details of the API. The first one is the one where all the documentation is, and the other 2 are the applications which actually are developed for from Google for transliteration and translation respectively. So done. So do you have any questions? Self-host. So you mean the transliteration technology itself you want to sort of ship? To the server. Right. Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, correct. Okay. Okay. Yeah, currently we don't have such a thing, but this is a good feedback point. Yeah. Correct. Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Thanks. Yes. Yeah, but not in the API as such. But actually, if you go to translate.google.com, there is a after you get the translation, there's actually a suggest translation button. Right. Yeah. So currently the API part does not support this, but definitely the product has it. But and again, that's a very good point that probably having an API to do the same thing would be useful. What is the correct one? Yeah. I agree. Thanks. Right. So currently the system is actually trained on like giving better translations on the whole thing. Also, if you start like if you're used to typing in a particular English transliterated form, supposing I'm typing up. Now, if I'm typing A and it's changing on the fly, then there's a different kind of user interaction there, right? If it changes to I should know that I should now type another A and it will become and so on. So these are basically different user experiences, and we have chosen this one, and it seems to be working quite okay. On space, they know what the English one is, and now they transliterate the complete thing. Yes, correct. Okay. Yeah, you can.
You are using you are saying that you are using statistics-based machine translation, right? So what is the testing methodology you are using, and if it is blue, that is bilingual evaluation under study, which is given by IBM, what is the score you are getting?
So we are not using a very standard kind of evaluation for the accuracy in terms of blue scores or anything like that, but we do internal testing. Basically we do have training data and test data, and we compute accuracies on that. I am not sure if that is publicly told.
Because I have seen in Arabic translation and all that blue score is given something.
Yeah, that okay. You mean translation?
Translation, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I have seen Arabic language, it is given as 0.7 or something.
Can you make use of translation API in other languages other than JavaScript?
From other languages, you mean? Yeah, actually, from you have access allowed from like Flash. The low level one only is allowed from Flash, Java, and PHP. There are accesses possible to the API through these three. There are more detailed code snippets on the documentation side, but these are the three which are definitely possible.
Okay, thanks.
See, what I want to ask is, see, because ultimately what we all think is, everybody in India, most of the people who are going to use the web will not know to use English. Okay, that's the assumption. Okay, so if I want to be entering the text, okay, so he has no clue to enter AAP. So how will he use the Hindi keyboard?
So
I'm saying that you need to integrate that also into this tool.
Okay.
Is my suggestion.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, that's a valid point. Although I think the number of people who speak some English and who can actually type phonetically is much larger than the 80 million English literate population.
Now,
correct.
yeah, but I'm saying what you folks are doing is really for the future.
Yes, correct.
So, you know, you might as well